Our next presenters for today are Brent and Andrea Woolums. Brent and Andrea live in Denton, Texas, where they are at the tail end of raising their 9 children into adulthood. They're high school sweethearts, and after 34 years of marriage, are just still blessed at how God gives them to each other. Brent has been a project manager at IBM for 35 years, and Andrea serves as the coordinator of elementary faith formation at their parish. Their oldest is 32, and their youngest is 13. 4 of their children are married. 1 is a new youth minister at a local Catholic church, and 1 is entering his 3rd year of seminary, and the 3 remaining are still attending their local public schools and live at home. They've had 3 weddings in the last 3 years and are enjoying the fruit of that, as this year they have welcomed 3 new babies to make a grand total of 5 grandchildren. Brent and Andrea made their covenant of love with Mary in 1996 and dedicated their Cynical Home Shrine in 1998. And they feel they can truly say that they have been transformed and are still being transformed through the graces from the shrine. They look forward to sharing some of their experiences trying to incorporate Father's teaching into their marriage and family. Please welcome Brent and Andrea Woolum.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Hello.
Okay, so we were asked to share a photo of our family.
All right, let me go through this.
Take the share screen.
But when we were asked to give this testimony, we were like, yeah, we can do that. And all right, I'm getting there. And we said, sure, we can do that. And then they said, well, we'll give you a generous. But I can't get the picture back now.
Click on the screen and then go back. Here.
Okay. So then they said, we'll give you a generous 30, 40 minutes to talk about it. And they were like, what? Okay. So as you can see, the reason for the apprehensive is that we got 9 kids, like Jason said. Thank you, Jason, for the wonderful introduction. And I did want to say thank you to the Sanchez's for breaking down one of Father Kentenick's talks for us. I'm not alone in saying what a beautiful job you did. But as you can see in our picture, we too have 9 children, 4 in-laws, 5 grandkids, and a little squirrel in the tree to talk about. So we needed some inspiration on how we're going to take these thousands of memories in our life in a testimony and put them in some coherent manner that we could give to you in a 30-minute talk. So lo and behold, God is good. He did give us that inspiration through a presentation that Sister Danielle Peters gave us about 3 weeks ago. And so with that presentation, she gave us this image in showing, and you see the root down there as a foundation, and Andrea will go through this in more detail here. And then you have a trunk that shows the visible signs of our efforts. And then at the top, you get the leaves with the fruit of the efforts. And so to get back to us for a moment. And so what Andrea and I did, is we put 27 years of our Schoenstatt experience into a pack-filled 20-minute presentation. And so before I hand it over to Andrea, I did want to tell you I came prepared because she's an emotional speaker, you know, just to be full disclosure here, I brought a box of Kleenex. And because she can be a very lengthy talker, I brought my hook. So with that, I will give Andrea the generous portion of 20 minutes to jam you with 4 hours of material here. 1, 2, 3, go.
Okay, it's true. I I can start making or creating a talk. And I looked at it 3 days ago and I went, Brent, you have to help me cut. I've got like 5 hours worth of material here. So one of the things with that tree image that, God, that struck me so much in my heart. And I was able to organize all my thoughts so well into the tree image. But one thing that wasn't on the slide that Brent showed you was the atmosphere that the tree is growing in. And that atmosphere that Father Kinsinek talks about is that atmosphere of love that we have to consciously and intentionally create in our families and our homes. And so, you know, this is a testimony, so I feel like we're going to just be hitting you with so many examples of what we try to do. And one of the things Brent really pointed out to me, he said, yeah, you know, looking back on 27 years, all this fits perfectly into this image. We didn't have this, you know, we were just kind of taking something Father said and trying to apply it. And if it worked, it worked. If it didn't, it didn't. We listened to what other families were saying and we tried to put it into our family, but sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. Not everything is for every family. It had to be something organic and grow from our heart and from our love and from the atmosphere of love. And so what are some things that we did to try to build that atmosphere of love that we learned from Father Kinsinek? We tried really hard to intentionally spend time with each child, which is not easy with 9, spending time with each child personally, one-on-one, doing what they want to do, not doing what I dictated or what Brent dictated, or, you know, just really what are they interested in? I find this particularly hard right now with my middle school boys. And because their life is video games and I do not do video games. But I even put it into my spiritual daily order. I had 9 names and I would try to mark, you know, who was I hitting, you know, with spending one-on-one time doing, you know, listening to them or doing what they wanted. So I know that was an intentional thing that we did. Creating traditions in the home. In fact, we've been accused of having way too many traditions by our daughters and sons-in-law.
Well, I will tell you up front that even our son-in-law, who just married into the family last year, they were trying to make plans to go visit his family on some
Easter.
Yeah, I guess it was Easter holiday or it was Good Friday. And anyway, they said, well, we can't leave yet because we have this tradition that we have to go through on Friday. And he's like, of course you do.
We have a lot of traditions, but one of the good things is our recent daughter-in-law said that one of the traditions we have is celebrating the baptismal feast days of our children in the home. And it's pretty simple, you know, we let them choose the meal at dinner, let them choose a dessert. We put their baptismal candle on the table. We have a little bowl of holy water. The dad always leads the prayer and asks a blessing on this person. And then the child, this is their favorite part, gets to carry around the bowl of holy water to each person, and each person crosses them on their head with the holy water to remind them of their baptismal promises. Well, our daughter-in-law, she said, it made an impact on me when I attended baptismal celebrations. I had always wanted to celebrate them with my family, but wasn't sure how to. Then I witnessed the celebration at your house, the special meal and dessert, lighting their baptismal candle, and everyone blessing them with holy water, and the prayer before eating, thanking God for that particular soul. So that really made an impact on our daughter-in-law as she joined our family. Other things we did were building memories. Family adventure night, that was a large part of it. Oh goodness, I have the wrong notes, I think. I was gonna, anyway, I wanted to tell a story about my son on Family Adventure Night. Family Adventure Night was a night that Dad and I planned, didn't tell the kids anywhere we were going. We would pile everybody into the van and not tell them, but we usually had 2 to 3 places planned, like bowling, and then maybe a walk around the park, and then out. It always ended with Beth Marie's ice cream on the square in Denton. That's like a huge tradition in our family. So
well, and that's by design, because no matter what we did the first 2 adventures, if they didn't like it, they always loved the ice cream. So
anyway, the other things we did were listening, making conscious efforts. I've been told multiple times I'm not a good listener, so I've had to really work hard on this one for my particular examination in this spiritual daily order. Listening, really demanding a tone of attitude of respect, and mainly really just seeing the dignity and the face of God in each child. That was what we did to build that atmosphere of love. So if you can go back in your mind to the image of the tree, the roots that are hidden underneath the soil are not visible to people. They're not visible, but that is our deep connection to God, the Blessed Mother, but it's our childlikeness that creates that. Our Father in heaven cannot be a father unless we are a child before him. And our mother cannot act as a mother unless we become that child. And so consciously working on our trust in divine providence, our childlikeness in the home shrine, standing before God, before the Blessed Mother, that has been us. And to give a little bit of transformation background, Brent and I were not raised in faith-filled families. Our families didn't pray together as we were growing up. We sporadically attended church services. Brent was not baptized Catholic, and we hardly talked about faith in our family at all. We came together in marriage, but with a root system that was hardly developed at all. So being introduced to Schoenstatt was absolutely transformative for us. We learned our Catholic faith as well as learning Schoenstatt. And as we read and discuss, as we read and discussed and discovered Father's teachings, we would try to apply these to our lives. And sometimes those roots that we were trying to apply were really large roots and really heavy, serious issues in our family. And sometimes they were small things. But it now is a network of childlikeness and trust in divine providence that builds who we are visible to the outside world, that trunk. One of the things, examples that we can share with you is our fertility. That was a really big root for us, because as we got married, and I shared, we had not been raised in the faith. We had no idea. And so we were actually contracepting when we started marrying because we didn't know any better. And as we learned more and more about our faith, as we grew in Schoenstatt, we were able to understand and embrace more the teachings of the church. But it wasn't easy. Our plan when we got married, I think, was 2 or 3 kids, and that was it. And so as we embraced our fertility, we also had to embrace this trust in God that whatever and whoever, whatever little soul he sent us, was meant to be in our family, and that he would also give us the means to support, educate, clothe, feed that child as well. But that was a slow growth process. I remember being terrified to tell Brent we were pregnant with number 3, and knowing how worried about finances he was and how connected he still was to that earthly worry. But we were very blessed. And as we grew and grew, by the time we were having number 9, I pulled him into the home shrine and I was like, guess what? And we were good. We were totally able to turn to the Blessed Mother and say, we know you're going to take perfect care. And the interesting thing is that the entire family kind of embraced this attitude. And we would talk at the dinner table and they would say, oh, we feel like someone's not here yet. But once number 9 came along, almost everyone had that feeling, hey, we're all here now. And it was true. It was beautiful. So it was that connection, I think, with the supernatural that we had, that idea that we had put it all in God's hands and he was going to send us who belonged to our family. Little tiny root here. We asked for little testimonies from our children. Our 17-year-old just shared. She said, Mom, childlikeness, you always taught us to turn to prayer, to God in prayer for every little tiny thing. And anytime we were struggling or needed help with something, and she said, I do that all the time. I do it all day. Any little thing that's challenging me, I turn to God and I plead for help. And she said, you know what? I didn't realize until about a year ago that that's not a common thing to do. I didn't realize my friends didn't do that too until recently. So it was such a part of her life, that childlikeness was such a part of her life that she didn't even know that other people didn't do that. One of the other little roots I mentioned earlier, that family adventure night. And little did we know that we were, while having fun and trying to build memories with our family, we were also teaching some important things about God. I wanted to read to you what our 30-year-old son shared. He says, and he's quite the writer, I have to warn you a little bit. He says, when I was young, my parents instilled a monthly event that was dubbed Family Adventure Night. Simple enough. They were evenings that we would scrabble over each other into our family vehicle and head off on an adventure. It could be eating a meal out, putt-putt golf, a movie, a concert, etc. The point, however, is that the parents knew what was happening, but the children did not. That excitement that I would feel at the unknown of what lay before us as I tumbled into my seat and pulled the seatbelt over my shoulder was addicting. I loved the mystery and the feeling of exploration and intrigue until we had the highlight of the big reveal and the enjoyment of whatever it was as a family. It's not hard to make the jump from the natural to the supernatural here. How much greater must our reward be from our Heavenly Father, who knows and loves us with a love greater than anything we can experience here on earth? The mystery of what lies in store for me in my life, and even beyond my life in death, is so much more exciting than when my parents loaded us unceremoniously into our Ford and rambled off on an adventure. My parents didn't disappoint, and it obviously gave them joy to give us these experiences. Oh, how much more so with God, our Father. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for the ability to greet adventure with a thrill and a smile and reminding me to buckle up for it. I really thought that was amazing. So we're still on childlikeness, that root, and how we've tried to build that. Another testimony from our 22-year-old who just graduated from Benedictine with a degree in evangelization and catechesis. She said in one of her theology classes, she was encouraged to interview about 10 people and ask them to describe her spirituality. And she said it was really amazing, Mom and Dad. Most of the responses I got in one way or another said I had a childlike love, a childlikeness before God. And I thought, oh, that's really beautiful that she does embody this more than any of our other children. She embodies that childlike love. Now, the childlike love can have, it is a part of us that's not visible, meaning it's where we're bearing our souls in front of God, but also in our marriage, bearing our souls to each other, as Terry and Ed talked about in that Schoenstatt holy hour. We're not showing that to the rest of the world, but what builds out of that and what is the visible part of the trunk is that priestly motherliness and fatherliness. And when I used to teach baptism class for the church, we would talk about how someone is baptized priest, prophet, and king. And we'd unpack those and talk about, well, what does a priest do? A priest offers sacrifice. He is the one standing in persona Christi. He is Christ for us. And he leads us all. He gathers us together. And so Brent and I tried to look at, okay, well, how are we a priestly mother or a priestly father? How have we worked on that? And we came up with a couple of concepts that we felt like, I think Terry and Ed mentioned these as well, many of these as well. Prayer was huge as we led our family in prayer. Sacrifice, not only our own sacrifice, but teaching our children to sacrifice. Respect and freedom. Those were the 4 areas we thought we'd share with you some testimony of how we worked on that in our family. Now, I have to be honest, with prayer, that was a huge growth point for us, not being raised in the faith, not really knowing how to pray. One of the sisters gave us a Pilgrim MTA as we joined Schoenstatt, and we literally, I remember doing this, standing in the middle of my house with the home shrine, with the Pilgrim MTA going, I don't know where to put her. And in reflection, I thought, this was an analogy for where we had no idea where to put prayer in our lives. We had no idea what we were doing. And so eventually she landed on a little sewing machine cabinet with a tablecloth thrown over it. And we would awkwardly stand there with our 2 children and pray the Our Father and the Hail Mary and say goodnight. It was really very awkward. We did not know what we were doing.
And after that, through the years, I'll be truthful, it was rough. It was rough. But what we learned, looking back now, is it's okay for it to be rough. And it's okay for it to be chaotic. Because children are children. And you have to learn to forgive yourself as you're striving. And just keep moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it back over.
So as we were struggling in our prayer life, Sister brought us a more permanent picture so we could have the Blessed Mother with us all the time and Jesus in our little space, our prayer space. And we started to move beyond just the Our Father and the Hail Mary with someone introduced us to the five-finger prayer. And we actually then, after we introduced it to the children, we'd have them lead the five-finger prayer. And our son, Ben, he's 25, he said that we each had a night when we would lead night prayer. I felt like that taught us to lead prayer and be comfortable with leading prayer. So it was one of the more powerful moments in our lives. Who knew, you know, a little five-finger prayer could teach our kids so much. One time my brother came to visit and we prayed with them. And my brother's not a practicing Catholic. And he came to me afterwards, he goes, "Your prayer makes me so uncomfortable." And I said, "Why?" And he was like, "Well, because y'all all just talk. What is that? That's not Catholic." And I was like laughing because he was so uncomfortable with us just being vulnerable and talking out loud in front of other people and praying. I thought that was interesting. The kids demanded more. During Lent one year, they demanded that we learn more prayers. And so one of the funny things that happened, you know, little traditions like your salmon colored prayer book and your home shrine edentary, was we had adopted one of the prayers from the Cynical Home Shrine in Chile as our home shrine prayer. We changed the words a little bit and we learned to memorize it. And at the very bottom, I put the Holy Spirit descending, a little image. And so our little 3-year-old called that the Ducky prayer. And so from now on, he's 13 now, it is still called the Ducky prayer. And it is our Cynical Home Shrine prayer that we have all memorized. And it's a beautiful way that we express that. And the kids often ask for the Ducky prayer. Another thing that developed in our prayer life is our parish were so blessed, they started offering adoration. And even during the, you know, overnight. And so they'd have special times and the kids would say, "Oh, let's sign up for 4 a.m., you know, so nobody else will be in there," because they wanted to go as a family. And we'd all pile into the car and go to adoration at 4 a.m. And some of the kids who were able to play the guitar, they brought the guitar and we'd sing and praise and worship and have silent adoration time. And then the culmination, of course, was breakfast at IHOP together. But that's a good memory for the kids in our prayer life. And what has touched us so much is that in this COVID time, our prayer has been manifest, that fruitful love, the leaves of the tree. Our older children, our adult children, are doing Zoom prayer sessions each week, twice a week together. And they have moved on beyond our little Our Father and Hail Mary and five-finger prayer. And they've moved into the Divine Office and they've moved into praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet together. I'm very my heart swells when I join the Zoom meeting and my son says, "Tonight we're praying the evening consecration from heavenwards." So that really touches me a lot to see that fruitfulness of our prayer life. Last, I want to share 2 more little testimonies of that. Katie is our daughter-in-law who joined our family a couple of years ago. She says, "One of my first memories of the Woolums was gathering for night prayer. It was nothing super special or ornate, just gathering everyone in the home shrine to pray. I don't remember the prayer much, but what I do remember was how normal it was for this family to gather for prayer and pray together. I absolutely loved that. And I remember thinking to myself, this is how I want to raise my family." Another thing I want to share is that Brent, this is something he's an introvert, and this has been something hard for him to share a prayer out loud. And I remember a time when another father was encouraging him as a father to pray out loud and lead a rosary, and Brent was having none of it. I was afraid it was going to come to blows at one point. He says it wasn't that bad, but I could tell there's some tension going on. But now Brent has embraced this role in our family so beautifully. I've been so blessed to see the growth in my husband. Here come the tears. Our daughter-in-law Allison says, "The first time I really met everyone in your family was at your 50th birthday party." That was mine. "And it was my first experience with Brent's special event prayers," because Brent now leads our family in prayer and special events. And she says, "I've always been impressed by them and the way that they speak of the family culture." And so that's been an amazing transformation that I've seen in my wonderful husband. Yeah. So moving on to sacrifice. Of course, sacrifice started with us as parents. Our life was already a trial before we learned Father's principles and through Schoenstatt. And so being able to offer them in sacrifice and attach meaning to that trial and those sacrifices was quite transformative in our life. Some of the sacrifices that we've offered up intentionally. Brent has been with IBM for much of his adult life, and it hasn't always been the easiest job in the world to do. It's always been very, very challenging for him, and he's a lot of times felt like he was in a job that just didn't fit. Yeah. But I know part of that bearing his soul to me, that he has offered that up for all those years for our children and our family, and I think that's been a powerful, powerful sacrifice on his part. On my part, I have struggled with homeschooling. I'm an educator. I was a teacher before I came home, and I wanted to homeschool my children, and I tried it twice. It didn't work. Finally, an impetus came, finally got to homeschool my children, and about 6 or 8 years into it, I just was miserable. Absolutely. I cannot even begin to express to you how miserable I was. I was depressed. I was in a really, really bad place, and I wasn't a good mom. And God sent me so many signs that this is not what I was supposed to be doing. And I just refused. I was like, how can God possibly want me to put these children in public school? I cannot even begin to think that this is God's will for my life.
Well, and just to, sorry to interrupt, but just to say, she is a public school teacher when she came out of college. So
yeah,
this was surprising to me.
No, I knew firsthand what was going on in the public school. I didn't want my children in that toxic environment. And it was really, really hard. I feel like over a couple of 2 years, God was like prying my fingers loose of my children. I remember telling one friend, she goes, why are you still homeschooling? When she heard all those signs that God was sending me, why are you still homeschooling? She goes, oh, I said, I can give him my fertility, I can give him my finances, but I can't give him my children. And it was a really hard growth point for me to finally be able to look at it realistically and go, God is saying this and I have to do this. It was so hard, and I grieved and I struggled, but it has been an amazing blessing for us to let go and put that in God's hands. So that was another place that we grew. Sacrificed. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Sorry, I got back into childlikeness and trust in divine providence.
Well, and I just want to add that those are two perfect examples of where we internally said we were unhappy, but internally we could, when we reflect, we could see the gift in what God gave us in the resources. Like in my job, even though I was unhappy day to day, feeling like a blue collar worker working in a white collar job, it was also a gift, because that was what he provided for us, for me to take care of a family that was growing and growing larger than we ever imagined. And for her, with the homeschooling, where she finally said, yes, God, I'm going to do your will, and put him in. And then we ended up in a public school system that was very good for them. They flourished. I mean, there were these little problems, but the children flourished in this public school system that we did end up in. So turn it back over.
So that sacrifice of our hard things was what we worked on, but we also tried to teach our children to sacrifice, like Ed and Terry talked about, with the concrete gifts to contributions to the capital of grace. And we did this in lots of different ways, liturgical expressions in the home. You know, in Advent, we'd have the nativity, and we'd add straw to the baby Jesus's bed, so that on Christmas Eve we could bring the baby Jesus and put him in a soft bed. During Lent, we tried different things. We tried I made a felt banner, and we'd put little grape leaves for all the sacrifices, or we'd have marbles in a jar, or crown. We'd take out the stickers on the crown of thorns in the middle of our table. Just different ways to express these sacrifices liturgically that meant a lot to our children. I remember one time my daughter Alyssa was in my girls youth group, my Schoenstatt girls youth group, and I talked about the idea of sacrifice. And I know Father Kenton had said at one time, it's kind of like a little pebble in your shoe, you know, all those little irritants in your day. Don't take it out right away. Embrace it and let it be there for a little while and offer that up like a little pebble in your shoe. Well, my daughter took it very literally as a 7 or 8 year old, and she came home and put a marble in her shoe, and she tried to do her family chores with this marble in her shoe. And so either she came to me and we discussed this, or she figured this out on her own. But she finally said, we were talking to her, she's 22 now, about this concept, and she said, well, I want to share with you, Mom, that that really grew into a huge thing for me. And she said, when people would ask me to pray for them, or when I knew someone needed prayers, I would tie it to something concrete. And like, I hated making my bed. And she said, so I started offering making my bed for a person. I would pray for that person every time I made my bed. And she said that, and that has grown. And we were all talking about this in the kitchen, and my 17-year-old was there. And my 17-year-old, Adriana, had asked Alyssa to be her confirmation sponsor. And Alyssa turned to Adriana while sharing this, and she said, Adriana, when you asked me to be your confirmation sponsor, I had the hardest time remembering to pray for you until I finally tied it to something. And that was the bells at consecration in the Mass, because our daughter, our 17-year-old's home shrine symbol is the bell. And so she was able to tie that. And she said, so know to this day that every time I hear the consecration bells, I'm praying for you. And that was beautiful. And then she shared the testimony that in college, she was on retreat team, and she gave this testimony, and she told the story about the marble in the shoe and making her bed. And she said about 4 months later, somebody that had attended that retreat came up to her and said, you know what? I embraced that, and know that when I make my bed now, I pray for you. And I thought, how beautiful that's, here go the tears again. Moving forward, that paying it forward, you know, that spreading that is so beautiful through our children. It's just been so wonderful to see that. Okay, and then Ben also shared that made a huge impression on him. And I know I'm running out of time, I'm running out of space. One thing, if you don't have, there's a Schoenstatt Stations of the Cross, and I think it's been lost. I don't know if it's in Wisconsin, but somebody gave it to me years and years and years ago, and it is a child's perspective, and it is so powerful that all during the year, we do it every Lent. Every Friday, we gather for Stations of the Cross in the home shrine, and we pray the Schoenstatt Stations of the Cross. In fact, my kids are station snobs. Oh, yeah. They will not pray any other Stations of the Cross. This is it. Or they'll complain. Yes, I tried to break out. But what's beautiful is they use the words all year. When we're talking about sacrifice, one of the quotes from the Stations of the Cross is, cowards are always walking around crosses. Embrace, to take up your cross. And so my kids will say that to me, Mom, cowards are always walking around crosses. And so they've internalized that Schoenstatt Stations of the Cross from us praying them for years. They have them memorized, for Pete's sake, only saying them during Lent. We only say them on Fridays during Lent, but they know those words and they've internalized them. So it's just been beautiful. Okay, moving on to the I don't know which point it is, sacrifice. We're on to respect. One of the things that we feel like we fostered in the home and through Schoenstatt was that respect for each other, learning each other's temperaments, learning each other's personality types through Myers-Briggs and other tools. That has given, not only did it help our marriage, because no one ever taught me that other people thought different than me. I don't know how I got to be a 27-year-old with that kind of immature thinking, but I did. And thanks to Schoenstatt, I was exposed to a different way of thinking, and that was my husband's. And so it really helped our marital discord a lot for me to realize, oh, he just thinks and approaches things differently than I do. And then we were able to transfer that to our children and understand our children better as parents, and to help them understand each other. it's been amazing, especially with these two boys here at the end that are so close in age, to help them try to recognize each other's temperaments, each other's gifts, each other's weaknesses, and to be able to say to my 14-year-old, he is so frustrated with the 12-year-old, because the 12-year-old, or he's 13 now, the 13-year-old's crying about everything. He's very sensitive. And I look at, and our 14-year-old has a bad habit of lying. And so I look at the 14-year-old, I go, is it easy for you to stop lying? And he's like, well, no, I struggle. And I go, then how much patience should you have with your brother who's struggling with crying? You know, just be patient with him. He's working too. He's working through his weaknesses as well. And so being able to have that conversation with a 13 and 14-year-old boys has been very powerful. And that's what we got from Schoenstatt. Katie, our daughter-in-law, says, another thing I noticed about the Woolums was their willingness to serve one another. It came so naturally to them. It's one of my favorite things about my husband, how selfless and other-focused he is. I could see that your love of neighbor really started at the family level when I watched them interact, and now I get to be a part of it as well. So that high degree of respect, we had a zero tolerance for tone or attitude. Brent and I were talking last night going, now how do we handle it though? Do you remember? And he was like, we would just go, try again. And so they knew that we demanded that respect for each other and for us. And we also showed that to them as well. We strove to do that. Moving on to freedom, we felt like this was another way that we worked on being a priestly mother and father. In hindsight, of course, we didn't. So neither one of us is a very controlling person. I'm more than Brent, but he's a phlegmatic, so he's real laid back, and we don't do well enforcing consequences, frankly. And so we had to figure that out as parents. We couldn't do long-term grounding because both of us would forget. That was just really hard for us. So we ended up really having to work on that immediate natural consequence in that moment in helping our children. So with the idea that freedom that Father Kentenich put forward to us was that we need to give our children as much freedom as possible. And so we give them those guidelines, and then we teach them, and we allow them to make their choices. And if they choose incorrectly, then that the main motivator there is, in this atmosphere of love, they've disappointed us, you know. And so it's a disappointment, not a fear of punishment or a fear of a punitive consequence, but there's a disappointment and a natural consequence. And that is a natural consequence, is that disappointment. And I have an example for one of my children, but I think we're really running out of time. And so the fruitful love is those leaves that we see. And we've tried to share some of that throughout our talk. But I wanted to share just a little bit that we're seeing, you know, those fruitful loves were from them. But what we're seeing is our adult children, even if they move away, they're moving back home. And their reasoning is, we want to be around our siblings and have our cousins grow up in a family. You know, we want to be with our family. They also make efforts to come home. In fact, this has become a little bit of an issue lately because they all come on different nights. And so we find we have no time to get anything done. We're going to have a family meeting and say, everybody come on Sunday, because we can't do this every night of the week thing, visiting with y'all. We have things to get done. So, and as adults, they're also inviting each other to each other's homes, which I think is another evidence that they really have good relationships, and they're playing games together and creating strong adult bonds. And then we love to see their beautiful marriages that they're having. So in closing, we learned Father's principles one at a time. Brent and I had a habit of, our closest shrine for most of our Schoenstatt time is 8 hours away. You would be surprised how much of Father's talks and readings you can get through in 8 hours in a van, you know, with all the kids in the back. We can really make it happen. We rock those talks.
And how much gasoline you can burn.
Yeah, so that's what our habit was. Whenever we traveled or went anywhere, we had a book and we would start talking and start reading together. And we talk about how to implement it in our family. And so it was one at a time. It wasn't all at once. It was, we would try things, and some things worked and some things didn't. And we just have to let it grow organically and not try to force it on our family. Our daughters shared, she goes, Mom, I love the rosary today because you didn't force us to pray it. She said, you let us choose it, but you didn't force us to pray it every day. And I know friends that were forced to pray it every day, and they abhor it. They can't do it. And so I'm sure there are some that were forced and they love it, but that's not been our experience. And that was her testimony, that she felt like she loved it because she could choose it.
Well, the approach was always doing and choosing things out of love, not out of obligation. So that was our philosophy.
But I wanted to share as a closing, whenever we felt ourselves feeling overwhelmed, lost, like we were failing, out of gas, all those things. I love the prayer where Father Kentenix talks about being curled up in a corner, and he's like curled up and I don't know what else to do. We would visit the shrine and we would get filled up again. I used to tell Brent, I need to go fill up my gas tank of grace because I can't go on any longer. Without our visits to the shrine, physically, without our visits to our home shrine, we may not have been able to keep the faithfulness that we've been able to keep for so many years. Attempting to live out Father's principles and being ready and willing to accept whatever God throws our way for our own sanctification, we do rely on our Mother and Queen for our love and support. She is the center of our home and our home shrine. And we've shared our successes. We didn't testify to our failures, but they were many. So
we forgave ourselves.
we had to forgive ourselves and move on. And so therefore we didn't share those with you. So anyway, but know that they were there, and they're a large part of it, in fact. And it's only in looking back in hindsight that we can see the thread of Father in our family. And we're so very grateful for that transformation. So thank you.